So this is going to be how do I design the system of the install. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a look at different things like where do I need to put my console? Where do I need to put my nozzles? How do I get my tubing from point A to point B? And what are some things that I need to look out for? So we're going to cover that in this section. Most of the time we're going to be focusing on the backyard of the homeowner. In a lot of situations we've got pool equipment. Some situations we don't. We've got just like an AC unit. So what I generally like to do is look for those two areas right off the bat and establish where I'm going to put the console. The console can actually be installed on the wall, or it can be placed on the ground on a foundation. So it's a hybrid install system. We're going to talk about it as if we were doing a wall mount. In this situation, I would go to the pool equipment because we're going to be looking for a power outlet and we're going to be looking for a water source. A lot of times you're going to find those at the pool equipment. For general purposes, we're going to say that we're installing it right here above the foundation on the wall with the pool equipment. The next thing I'm going to look for is where am I going to put my nozzles? We want to create a perimeter around the yard. So we're going to look at the side fence, the back fence, the other side fence, and then we've got different levels of control. So you can go back and do reinforcements. So you can say like your second level would be like your landscape. A third level would even be like your patio cover here. So we're going to kind of establish where we're going to put the nozzles. And then what I like to do is offer the customer A, B, and C. So A is going to be around the perimeter of the yard, typical install. B would be the perimeter of the yard and reinforcing in the landscape. C would be perimeter, landscape, and back patio. When you're getting your design, you're going to figure out your perimeter. And I like to take a laser measure and I like to measure the fence panels. Now, in some situations, a homeowner may have what we refer to as a shadow box fence. That's where a section of pickets face the neighbor, a section of pickets face the homeowner. In those situations, really you don't even need to do measurements. You can take a look at the panels and you can count the panels that are facing the homeowner or facing the neighbor and then get an idea of how many nozzles you're going to need. So when we're doing a perimeter, we want to make sure that our nozzles are roughly 8 feet. You can go 8 to 10 feet. So if it doesn't fall perfectly in line every 8 feet, don't sweat it. You can add an extra couple of feet to it to get it spaced out. But I like overlapping coverage. So we're going to put our nozzles, plan to put our nozzles around the perimeter of the fence. How are we going to get from the misting system over here on the wall over to the fence? And a lot of times it's just as simple as digging a small trench. And when we talk about trenching, we're not talking about like a termite trench where you're having to dig 16 inches deep, 8 inches wide, anything like that. This is a simple trench. So basically you just want to go deep enough to where the lawn equipment isn't going to damage the tubing. We have a tool that I recommend. It's a trenching tool. Basically it kind of looks like a spade. So you'll step on it, wiggle it back and forth, open up a channel, and then you'll stuff the tubing down in there and then just cover that back up. I do recommend when you come up or down into the lawn, adding some sort of protectant. You can use different things like conduit. A cheap alternative would be what they call wacky pipe. It's like a landscape pipe. You're going to want to put your protection over where you go into the ground, across over, and then we're going to come up to the fence. Now, that's in a typical installation. Not everything goes perfectly as planned. Sometimes the homeowner may have a walkway that's been poured around here that goes back to the back patio. In that situation, you can take a look. A lot of times they'll have landscape lighting, they'll have irrigation, things like that. You can find a sleeve underneath the sidewalk. Another option is you can take a look and see the expansion joints. A lot of times what I've done in the past is pull that expansion joint out, put my tubing in there, put the expansion joint back in, or I've even dammed it up and then used self-leveling adhesive so that way it looks nice and clean. So that's how you'll get from point A to point B. Say you're going to do the landscaping, you're going to reinforce the landscaping. Depending on how high this hedge is will depend on whether you want to use a riser or whether you want to use a typical T. If it's above the fence line, then what I'd recommend is going with a T. If the hedge is going to be basically below that nozzle, I would recommend stepping down and going with one of our landscape risers. Once you plant this into the ground, it's going to spray underneath that hedge, and you're going to get better protection. The hedge has a tendency to catch the mist and keep it from dispersing where it needs to be. For this one, we're going to say that that is above the fence line, above our nozzle. We're going to continue running it along the fence. Here's we're going to find a 4x4 post. We're going to put a T in line, a union T, not a misting T. Come down the 4x4 post, trench over like we discussed, over to the landscaping bed here. You're doing the landscaping bed, it's best to try to find the middle of the bed and do a T to split both ways. That way you're evenly distributing the pressure from the pump. We're going to come down, trench right in here to the backbone of this. Sometimes they're going to have edging around the flower beds. That's not a big deal. We'll just have to trench down a little bit deeper with a spade. We'll have to come underneath that, fill all that back in. Not a big deal, but it makes everything nice and clean. Typically when we're doing risers, I try to make it to where it lays with the landscaping. So if they've got, say they've got 4 of the little box ferns out there, well then, you know, I'll separate it in between those 4 box ferns. But some situations, you know, they've just got a ton of landscaping out there, a lot of ground cover. In that case, I like to put them about every 5 feet, so it's even spacing. So then we're going to continue along the fence, come over here. This tree over here is kind of out in the yard a little bit. It's not right on the fence, so we're going to continue with our misting tees along the fence, come over here, and then stop at this gate. Say that the customer, that's the option that they decide to go with, and then a couple of weeks they decide maybe they want you to come back out and add the 3rd level where you would go around the patio. That's pretty simple. So basically at the box, you're going to go in and you're going to put a T, and then you're going to run your tubing up the wall to the soffit. We have color options of white, brown, and black for your nylon tubing. Depending on the homeowner's preference and the color of their siding, you know, you're going to pick the color that goes blends in best with that. And then you're going to use your 1/4 inch, we call them the Pro clips. It's basically the clip that the nylon clip that already has a screw built in. Makes it a lot easier when you're working with hardy or your soffits and eaves, just because when you're up on a ladder, you're not having to fight with as much. When you go to install this, what I recommend is your soffit and your fascia is going to look like this. So your soffit runs parallel to the ground, your fascia runs right here, then you've got your gutter. What I recommend is putting your nozzles and your tubing right here where it's spraying out. It's tucked inside of this corner right here. It's nice and clean, nice and protected. When you look at it from the yard, you'll barely see any of the system, just basically the nozzle tip. So the idea is you want to make it to where the system is felt but not necessarily seen. You're going to come back, you're going to attach your tubing, which is going to be basically a feed line, because we're not going to have any nozzles on it until we get over here to this patio. Then you're going to start your nozzles. The Mugo console can support up to 60 nozzles. What I recommend is if you're adding this extra layer of protection, at this point I would recommend finishing out the feed line, coming over here and then connecting to the fence. So that way you're creating a complete circuit. That will help maintain your pressure balance throughout the entire system. It's not necessary, but it's definitely something that I would recommend, you know, in a larger system. So that's basically going to be your layout of how you're going to do, you know, your install and your design.